All right, so I want to just stop for a second, just in case you're not familiar with ES6 arrow functions in JavaScript. All right, these anonymous arrow functions in ES6. So if you're not familiar with that, then go through this video if you need a refresher, because we have switched our functions from just writing out regular functions to writing these ES6 functions in our tests, and we are going to do this in the front end when we're working with React as well. And there's a very good reason why we're doing this. So I want to explain what it is, refresh you, or if you don't know what it is, then take this video so you understand, because otherwise you're seeing me type in, async like this, and you're probably looking at this and wondering, well, you know what async is, we've got the async await, but then you're looking at probably this, and you're saying, well, what is this equal? This is like the opposite of greater than equal to, and no, this is actually an arrow function, all right? This is an anonymous arrow function. It's an anonymous arrow function, just like we can write anonymous functions. Let's actually break this down with examples in the IDE. And if you want to code along, you would actually have to create a .js, not a .sol, because this is JavaScript, remember, so arrow functions.js. But I'm going to provide this resource in case you want to know. All right, so what I'm telling you is that there's two ways to write functions in JavaScript. Okay, well, there's more than two ways, but two syntax ways we're going to look at arrow functions and regular. All right. Now, when we write a regular function, we should know by now. You should know by now in this course, even working with Solidity, even having an idea that when you want to write a function, right, you write the word function, then you bring in the arguments, and it's very similar. And then you return what it is. And this is how you would write a function in JavaScript. All right. So we say function this, then we return. We have two arguments. We want to add them up, so we add them up. All right. I have another example of a function here. We want to see if a number is more positive than zero. If it's a positive number in general, right? Because any number more positive than zero is going to be positive or equal to. So we return n for number. We've got another one here that's going to return a random number. We've seen these functions. You write function, all right? This is just a method, math.random. It just returns a random, all right? And then finally, we've got this for function at the bottom. And this function is an anonymous function. It means that this function here at the bottom, we don't even name. We don't have to name it. We don't have to name our functions. And the reason why we're not going to name it is because we don't have to store that information. We're just going to run this in. We're going to run this function, and that's it. All right, so that's how you write regular functions. Now, what if we wanted to write these in arrow functions? Well, why would we? Why would we even want to write this in arrow functions? Well, there's one really good reason, which I'm going to explain at the end. But for now, the other reason, something to think about that makes sense, is just that the syntax, it's easier. It's easier to write it out. It's easier to write it out. So how would we convert this regular function to a arrow function, right? Well, the first thing is that the function's assumed. So we don't have to write function. We don't even have to write function. If we want to if we want to convert this, we can just say sum2, all right? We could just say sum2. But we still need to say it's a variable, right? Because we still have to store this information. That's why we write functions. So we can use another ES6, syntax here and bring in let. So let sum2, okay? Let sum2 creates the variable space, but we don't have to write function. And then what we want to do is we set it to what? Well, to the argument. So we'll say let sum2 equal the function. And this is where we'd write the function. This is where we'd write the function A and B out like this. And that's the arrow function. And we can say return, oops, not true, A plus B, right? Like that. And this is the same. See, do you notice this curly brackets? This is the same thing. The only difference, forget this async. Forget the async. This just makes it asynchronous. This is an arrow function that is anonymous. This is the same thing as this, except there's no arguments and there is no variable that we're setting it to. And we're going to see how it's even more similar. And how can it be even more similar? Well, what else could we do? Well, in arrow functions, return is implicit, and so are the curly brackets. So we don't even need to write return. And we can get rid of the curly brackets. So we can put everything on the same line. Everything can go on the same line. And so this, let sum2 equal a comma b, and then arrow function, this is the arrow function, this is the variable, is the same as this. Now there is a key difference. We're going to look at that after. We don't think it's exactly the same in what it can do, but it essentially is the same thing for what we want it to do for the purposes of this. All right, let's convert another one. It's fun, right? Let's convert these older functions to these arrow functions, all right, which are not even that new anymore in text terms. All right, so we do the same thing, right? Let is positive equal n, right? Arrow function, bring in the function, curly brackets, return, n should be greater than or equal to 0, right? Right. Now we can do the same thing. We can say, hey, wait a minute, we don't even need this return. We don't need it. It's implicitly there. We don't even need the brackets. We're removing the brackets. And in fact, here's another thing. One single parameter, if you got one single parameter in an arrow function, you don't even need the parentheses. These are implied as well. Only if you have one. If we had multiple, we couldn't start doing this. We couldn't start doing n value, whatever, but since it's one, we can do this. We can do this like this, all right? See, a and b is 2, and it's just 1. And just like that, we've converted the second one. What about this third one? Why don't you go ahead, pause the video, see if you can convert it. Okay, so hopefully you gave that a shot, all right? This one also. So what can we do with this? We could say, well, let random number equal this. And would you look at that? Look at this. Just take a look. Oh, wait a minute. Return. Hold on. I'm getting too excited. We'll say return. I was jumping ahead. Map.random, and then we can do the same thing. Get rid of the return. All right. And if you got this, that's excellent. And would you just look at this for a second? Look at this outline. Just this part. And look at the async, right? This async. We had the async here. Doesn't this look similar? Doesn't this look similar? And I just want you to pay attention. I just want you to pay attention to that. And again, we can even get rid of these brackets. Now, unless we have multiple things happening, we want to keep the brackets, right? But if this is the end of the statement, then that's the end of the statement. We would want to keep these brackets if we had a lot of things happening like we do in our code. So we contain all the information in the script. But since this is all it is, we can remove the brackets. So that's an important thing to note. We keep these brackets in our code as we're moving along because we have multiple things happening. But if it was just one thing, if it was just await tether, which is await tether, or whatever, All right, so just something to think about, But here, we can actually remove the brackets. Now let's do this last one. Let's do it together. All right, so I'm going to convert this last one. So document.addEventListener, all right? And, let's just copy paste the whole thing. And here, function, remember, this last function is different than these other functions. These ones are explicitly named, right? This one, we don't store with the name. So this is just a pure anonymous function that gets executed, and that's it. So if we want to write this out, how do we write this out? Well, we remove the function. We don't have to name it. And just like that, we've got our anonymous function. Just like that, right? And there it is. So we don't have to write this function. We just bring this out. We have the arrows, and we're done. And we have our anonymous function. All right, so hopefully this helps for you to understand these arrow functions. You're not getting confused now as things start to get more advanced. I know we're moving more quickly along here. We're trying to get this project done together. But I want to make sure that you understand you understand the syntax, because if you're confused, it's not necessarily from just a lack of understanding the big picture. It's just because you don't know something like this, and this is something very important to know. So why do we do this? Here's the big question. Okay, besides the fact that, okay, maybe I just like the syntax better, really, Clarion, that you're just trying to confuse us, or you're going to put some kind of fancy arrow keys here? Well, no. Actually, there's a bigger reason here that's more important. And what that reason is, the this keyword, all right? It's the this, which comes from our constructor. And in general, especially working with React and this, there's a big difference with this, how this works, this keyword works in a regularly written out function versus an arrow function. And what is that difference? In an arrow function, the arrow function will access the will globally access this. It can actually take this. So if you have a special property, like we had a name, this.name, we needed to access name in our arrow function, a plus b plus this plus name, we could actually access it, right? From our constructor, we could access this. Don't even worry about the constructor. Just think, all right, this dot name, we've got this name that belongs to this. In this arrow function, we would be able to access this, which is outside of the function. But in this function, if in the regularly written function, if I wrote a plus b plus this plus name, this dot name would have to be redefined in the scope. Remember we talked about scope? It will not be able to access it. It will not be able to access it like this. All right, you can bind it, and there's other things you can do, but in general, moving ahead, this really matters. You know, this make the arrow functions for this makes a lot of things easier when working in JavaScript constructors. And so that's why it just makes sense for most cases. Most cases moving forward, when you're writing in JavaScript arrow functions, you know, most other coding languages have this already. You know, in their functions, they can access this. And JavaScript JavaScript can do this because of the arrow functions. And so in most cases, you want to go with the arrow functions because of this reason. Now there could be particular instances where you want to just keep it local to this in a function. But for the most part, no. And that's why moving ahead in our final project, when we're doing these descriptions, when we're moving on to the front end, we're going to see some arrow functions out there. So now hopefully you have a better understanding of arrow functions and this whole async thing with our describe, what these parentheses are and why they're working the way they work. All right. So you can review it, you can go through it, and if you get confused by these anonymous functions in the code, you know, I got the final project over here. You start seeing all these arrows like this, and you're like, oh no, what is this? What is this? Don't worry, we haven't written this out. Don't get confused. This is the final version I just downloaded to show you. But yeah, you know, when you see all this stuff later on, when you see these async anonymous functions, this is an anonymous function, all right? This is an anonymous function. I could write function out like this, but we're writing it out and we're using the arrows, and it's just better practice. It's just better practice. All right, hopefully that helps you out. Let's get back to the course. Let's get back to the project. All right, back to the project. Let's stay focused. Great work coming this far. And if you have any questions, just go to the Discord and ask over there. Always helps. All right. See you for the exercise, I believe, after this. Bye-bye.